grant the word to Claudia Marin, who coordinates IAPA on behalf of FAO, so that she can give us a little bit of a framework of the support of the project to this webinar cycle. Claudia? Thank you very much, Christina. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here again in this third webinar on this cycle of governance for protected areas. We know that it's a very important topic for the region. We love to see people here, familiar faces, that we keep following up on these webinars on a weekly basis and establishing contact with this large community. On behalf of the integration of protected areas of the Amazon biome and its partners, the European Union, FAO, WWF Colombia, UNICEF South, and the Latin American networks of parks and technical cooperation in protected areas, we give you a special welcome to all of you. We're very pleased to see you all here on a weekly basis, learning, sharing your knowledge with other people who are experts on this. And through this shared knowledge, we all learn together. The IAPA project supports the initiative of the Amazonic vision of the park network since 2014. And we are also supporting all of the countries part of the Parks Network, and which is why we're very pleased to be here with you today. We especially thank the presence for Mr. Patricio Lombardi, the Minister for Climate Change from the province of Misiones, who is also the chair of the Commission on the Environment of Sicosur. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us today and telling us about your experience in protected areas in this border region. I also want to thank Dr. Alexandra Moreira, the General Secretariat of the Permanent Secretariat of ACTO, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, which is a very important body for integration for our Amazon basin. I also wanted to especially thank Claudia Nunez, who's part of the work team for the Colombian park system, and she's a focal point for the Parks Network, for the Amazonic Vision, for the IAPA project, and many more things that Claudia does in collaboration with us, and we work very closely with her. And of course, we want to thank Stanley, who has prepared and has supported in preparing these webinars in conjunction with all of the team of the Latin American School of Protected Areas of UCI, which supports us with on the technical side and logistics side. It's thanks to them that we are here. I also wanted to thank and acknowledge the effort by the working group on governance of the Amazonic Vision, which is comprised by officials from the protected area systems of the Amazon countries. And of course, whoever is interested can join this group. They have supported this whole technical process and provided guidance, defining the steps to follow, which are so important for the region. And finally, we want to invite you to keep joining these webinars to leverage this opportunity to share with other experts, people who are familiar with the topic of governance of protected areas, to keep strengthening this technical cooperation network in the region, which has existed for more than 35 years. And thanks to all of us present here today, will continue to be alive for many, many more years. So once again, welcome. Thank you very much to all of the panelists and organizers, and we hope that this will be a very fruitful session, just like all the ones that came before it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you very much for your kind words. We're now going to share just 1 minute the agenda for today. Let me know if you can see my screen. For now, we can't. So far, we can't. It hasn't loaded. You can't see it, Chris.
Déjenme chequear.
Let me check.
Está cargando.
Está cargando, sí.
Ok. Bueno, entonces para hoy.
Very well. So for today, the topic of the day is governance in large landscapes. And to give a little bit of a framework, we have been working the first webinar with governance on the scales of each protected area. Then we've started to envision the governance and the integration with the environment and the landscape that they are in. In the webinar from last week, we saw a few specific cases of governance of border protected area or cross borders protected areas. The case that where two or more countries manage or try to do a more comprehensive management across borders. And then the webinar went more macro, and now the focus is large landscapes. How can we structure and articulate actions and promote good governance in a framework of certain international agreements that exist in our region in Latin America, such as the case of ACTO, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or SUR, which is a case that we will see today, or simply CARICOM for the case of the Caribbean, for systems like SICA, the Central American system, the Central America integration system. And so these large treaties among different countries encompass a variety and complexity of ecosystems and countries. So how can we envision the protection of protected areas and how the protection of these areas can function within the realm of these international treaties, since they encompass economic, social, and environmental issues, and how the protected areas also assign our roles in these processes at the macro process of the territory. Today, we will look at the case of Sicosur, the case of ACTO, and a case presented from the Amazon Vision, the park network in Great Landscapes. Since our time is very limited, I just wanted to tell you we will see these three presentations, and then by 9:20 approximately, we hope to open the floor for questions and answers, which in previous instances has been very fruitful. So I don't want to take away any more of your time. I want to delve directly into our topic. So we will first look at the presentation by Sicosur, and as I mentioned, we can try to envision through this presentation and through the discussion in the questions and answer session how the governance of protected area can be integrated in these processes of governance of great landscapes to leverage these processes, and how we can organize this intersectorial dialogue when development projects through different types of soil change use, such as the building of roads or other things that happen in the territories, how can we establish intersectorial dialogue in environmental issue, and specifically protected areas can be part of this intersectorial dialogue to envision a development, joint development that focuses on conservation. So we would start with the first case. I will present this case. This case will be presented by three individuals: Stanley Arguedas Mora, Patricia Lombardi, and Pamela Rebolleda. Stanley, I will introduce briefly all three. Stanley is Costa Rican. He has more than 30 years of experience on protected areas. He founded the Latin American School for Protected Areas of the Costa Rican Protected Areas Program, which is still ongoing. And he's also managed protected areas, public protected areas in the national park system. Patricia Lombardi is the Minister of Climate Change of the province of Misiones in Argentina. He has a vision on sustainable development for Sicosur, the integration system for this area of South America. He's been linked to work on creating awareness in good environmental practices and has been co-founder of Revolución 21 together with Argentinian artist Charlie Alberti. Finally, Pamela Rebolledo, she is from Bolivia. She's a biologist. She has a lot of experience working in the territories. She worked in some of the key parks in Bolivia. She also worked with the Cailla Park. She has worked for more than 11 years as a manager for the Pantanal program for WWF in Bolivia. And she has participated in the Environmental Commission for Sicosur in eco parks. And she's part of this joint experience with Stanley and with the Minister Patricio Lombardi. So without further ado, I thank you all three for your time and willingness to be here with us today. And I grant the word then to Stanley. My understanding is that you're going to start, right?
Sí, buen día.
Yes, good morning. Just want to confirm, are you seeing my screen?
Okay.
Presentation of Sicosur. Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting this case. And in particular, thanks to Minister Patricio Lombardi for joining us and Pamela for supporting us in this presentation. We will speak a little bit of the topic of the integration of protected areas within the framework of a political organization mechanism between different governments and between different sectors, as is Sicosur. First of all, I want to briefly introduce what Sicosur is. It's the integration zone for Central West South America, and it's born with the aim linked to the economic and commercial side, which is to improve the competitiveness of the governments of the region in order to insert themselves in the regional economies of the Americas and of the world. So it was born with a vision that was highly focused on the economic side, but it has been incorporating also other elements, other components. Sicosur, unlike what will be presented with ACTO or the Amazonic Vision, is not a body from national governments, is subnational governments. In the case of Chile, Peru, they involve regions. In the case of Argentina, they have provinces participating, provincial governments. In the case of Bolivia, we have department governments, and the same applies for Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil. Also, we have state governments participating. So it's a very interesting outlook. This has led us that, for example, in the case of Sicosur, we are currently working with protected area systems that are subnational. And that is a very interesting difference for this particular case. Sicosur is a political forum for coordination that encompasses more than 50 subnational states that belong to 7 different countries. I insist on the importance, on the focus, that this is subnational, which is why we have the Minister for Climate Change for the province of Misiones, who is currently the chairman of the commission. It covers an area that is essential for the region, which is known as the breadbasket of the world. And it's an area that is developing agribusiness, industry, mining, infrastructure. And the challenge of Sicosur is how to carry that forth, but meanwhile, protecting the ecosystems in order to keep providing environmental services that will support this development long term. Sicosur has a governance structure that is relatively simple. It has a plenary session of authorities, which encompasses all of the authorities from these governments, these subnational governments that I mentioned. And there they take agreements, make decisions, discuss elements. That is the highest level forum. Sicosur is a body that does not have a legal person in itself. It's a forum. It's an environment for dialogue, for interaction, for conversation, and for political agreements that are multilateral. Below the plenary, we have the pro tempore secretariat. Right now, we have Juan Luis Mansura, the pro tempore secretary, who's the governor of the province of Tucumán, and he has 6 subcommissions under it. These are the 6 commissions: infrastructure, logistics, connected services, agribusiness, production, mining and energy, tourism, culture, heritage, education, and social development. and the Commission on Mining and Energy. We will focus on this very last commission, which is the one on the environment, sustainable development, and climate change, which is overseen by Patricio Lombardi, who later will tell us about his commission and its future. And so we will discuss this aspect. This commission depends on the pro tempore secretariat and has a technical committee that is also an advisory committee. This is the group of institutions that belong to this technical committee. It's a group that assists and supports in the decision-making, the commission, and also to organize several things that we will now see that have been achieved thanks to the support of these groups. Unlike other bodies, Sicosur does not have its own financing as such, and so a lot of this that has to be established through alliances with different institutions. The Environment Commission, Sustainable Development and Climate Change, Sicosur, has done many different things. But I would like to comment three things in particular that are linked to this. One is the meetings among systems from the subnational governments to coordinate efforts and have political impact, which is one of the fundamental elements that we will discuss. The Socio-Environmental Observatory to generate information that supports the decision-making at the political level. Pamela Rebolledo is the person in front of this process. And one of the last activities that we carried out in a large framework, in the framework of the Commission, related with territorial government of protected area, is the Intersectorial Dialogue to build a production landscape that is sustainable in 4 areas within South America. I will tell you of the 3 progresses related to the insertion of protected areas in these political forums, and we will start with the meetings. The first meeting of protected areas was held in 2014, October 2014, and that was in Salta, Argentina. And since then, we've had 4. The second was in Santa Cruz, in Bolivia. The third was in Cuiabá, in the state of Mato Grosso, in Brazil. And the 4th was held in the city of Tucumán, in the province of Tucumán, in Argentina. I will show you a 3-minute video, which explains what this meeting is all about and what is the importance of this meeting related with the Salta Agreement, which has had an impact in some of the processes that occurred afterwards. I will show you this video. 3 minutes.
De octubre del 2014 se realizó en la ciudad de Salta.
9-10 October of 2014, in the city of Salta, Argentina, the first meeting for protected areas of Sicosur was held. Sicosur is the integration zone for Central Western South America, a political initiative of subnational governments that aims to integrate the economic, social, and environmental aspects of the territories encompassed in the northern part of Argentina, Chile, southern Peru, almost all of Bolivia, Paraguay in its entirety, and the state of Mato Grosso from southern Brazil. This meeting was organized by the government of the province of Salta in collaboration with the Latin American Faculty of Protected Areas, and had with aim the exchange of experiences, the analysis of the protected area system that operate in this territory, seeking better political support for the integration and consolidation of said systems based on international directives issued by the Convention on Biological Diversity. The event had the participation of approximately 100 individuals, including political personalities from Sicosur, as well as international specialists, high-ranking organizations such as the International Organization for the Conservation of Nature, the European Commission, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Foundation for the Preservation of the Dry Forest Chiquitano of Bolivia, among others. Also, 8 different public organizations presented their status quo since they govern protected areas, which provided an important sample of the level of governance of these areas within Sicosur, using as inputs the results from the joint effort carried out in the second day, as well as the presentations and discussions generated throughout the event, both in the plenary session as well as in the fieldwork. We developed what has been called the Salta Agreement, which consists in a request for support and a planning of specific actions that participants ask the plenary session for the authorities of Sicosur. The progresses in the application of results of this first event will have to be analyzed in the framework of the second meeting in a date and location that have yet to be determined. The Salta Agreement aims to be the initial push for an integration process for the protected area systems encompassed by Sicosur. So what's important of the Salta Agreement is precisely that it allowed us, the subnational protected systems, to have a document that has some level of political impact in this forum. And this connection is one of the important elements of these processes of entering political forums. But for this, we need good information. And that's where the second element that comes into place, which is the Socio-Environmental Observatory. And I will ask my colleague, Pamela Rebolledo, to present this observatory to us. Pamela. Good morning. Thank you very much, Stanley, for your introduction. The creation of the observatory was a pilot experience which was developed along with all of the organizations that are part of this support committee for the Environmental Commission of Sicosur. Then, of course, its implementation and the whole process of strengthening it and helping it grow is something that we will have to work with Minister Lombardi, with the new Environment Commission. While the Environment Commission was in the hands or under the responsibility of the Secretariat for Sustainable Development of Santa Cruz in Bolivia, we developed this pilot experience with, if Stanley, you could move on to the observatory itself, the link, I mean. Okay, at the observatory, what we did is with the other organizations, members of the support group, we built this first visor, which allows identifying different layers and helped us. For example, in this case, on the topic of protected areas, we identified more than 600 protected areas in the whole region, as you can see them, from the Sicosur area, among subnational and national. But it was a macro outlook that allowed us to have a different vision of the whole connective tissue of the area. We also analyzed the impact of fires and the amount of the population that exists in the region, the different types of populations that define the complexity of the landscape and of the protection of these protected areas and the management of this territory. How these fire scars have impacted the different areas and the different portions of landscape in the Sicosur area. Next, please. And what's important also is to give visibility of where every organization is working. It's important to identify where within this large landscape are organizations carrying out some type of activity, to identify gaps, the possibility of synergies or joint efforts, strengthening lessons learned, and a number of elements related to the management of the landscape, but also focused on protected areas. Next. The fruitfulness of this experience is that it's sort of a network of observatories. Even though there's a centralized hub of information that allows to visualize the framework of the Sicosur region, it is also linked to other observatories that other organizations hold. For example, the Pantanal Observatory. Next, the observatory for the foundation of the dry forest Chiquitano, where there are a number of elements as well. And here it's important, the link that exists, in this case specifically, with the early alert system for fires from the government of the Department of Santa Cruz, which is a formal tool for decision-making, but which is also made available and was incorporated in this analysis process, assessing fire hazards. So with this, we developed this pilot experience, an effort that had the focus of identifying the environment for different organizations to work. Synergies and joint efforts were identified with the vision of having an outlook and of identifying strategies on how to work on these highly complex elements with people, with fire, with soil change use, with number of protected areas that require joint management and that require connectivity processes. So that is essentially it, Stanley. Let's continue with the next. Thank you very much, Pamela. It's very interesting that this information supported a lot of the concerns that popped up during the encounters from the subnational governments to try to understand what was happening in the territory. And this political forum was helpful to generate these synergies, to generate this information. And along these lines, we reach a third point, which is the intersectorial dialogue. Once we understand that there's a number of forces that have a dynamic in the territory, we need to generate some type of exercise. And this led us to a work of what we call an intersectorial dialogue to develop strategic actions that allow us to result in a productive, sustainable environment in the region of the Paraguay River. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the limit of Cicosur as the orange border, and that green color is the basin of the Paraguay River, a little bit beyond the Mir Basin. It's an area that covers approximately 155 million hectares, and there were 4 biomes involved in this dialogue: Chacoyungas, Bosque Chiquitano, Pantanal, and Cerrado. It also involved the institutions of 4 different countries: Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Brazil, and 8 sectors: civil society organization, tourism, public sector, academic, civil, agribusiness, infrastructure, and international cooperation. This was an extensive dialogue. It involved many different elements, and it had an enormous impact on the region. The dialogue essentially produced a vision and 3 strategic pillars with concrete proposals on how to move towards a sustainable landscape. This future vision mentions elements such as landscape, the governance of these large landscapes. It mentions the integrated governance and management as fundamental elements. It also focuses on potential production and use. And this is a primordial element for Cicosur. And there are elements to guarantee the functioning of these systems, but also other elements. It generates or incorporates the side of prosperity.
An important element, attention to climate change and risks. And these elements were integrated to this group vision. In order to attain that vision, we worked on 3 axes, and each one of them, for example, when it comes to management and governance, we had the 3 strategic lines along dialogue. We identified the 3 aspects or 4 that are key, and then we had 8 key guidance or strategic, each one of them with a 3-page component by describing alliances, actions, and other elements. And everything around 3 cross-cutting areas. And the same for the other production axis, where we were able to identify strategic lines, key aspects, guidance, all well described into a document that is more than 100 pages, and we have concrete data. And as for conservation, we have the same when it comes to protected areas And what's interesting is that this has been integrated into a negotiation process in a big scale, because the purpose of all this effort was precisely to have a strategic framework that will stimulate and guide interventions on the region of the Paraguay River by having integrated management and intersectorial dialogue. And this is what we would like to present you with in relation to the work of this commission that has done much more than what we've mentioned. And to come to the end of my presentation and to continue with Minister Lombardi, I would like to share with you 4 of our lessons learned throughout the process. First of which is that this is important to be a part of these processes in order to have a political incidence on the decisions made for the transformation of territories. And when we work on these spaces, we have to be open to discuss in forums where we have people with different purposes and objectives and interests. We must learn how to negotiate and listen, as Pamela said a while ago, and not to try to impose, because we might believe that protected areas are the most important thing in the world, but you might be surprised to see how many other things can be the most important thing in the world for other sectors. So we must have a position with negotiating capacities, because we must understand and adapt to political governance of these spaces in order to be successful, because we need to work with a different logic than the one we are used to, and we need to understand it. And this process has required a great effort and a lot of emotional energy. And this is why they work if we are going to use it in a great scale in time and space. And we cannot expect results in a short time, less than a year, or to solve our operational problems like fuel or things like that, or solve all strategies, because this is something that we are going to use as spaces in order to generate solutions in the medium and long term in a large landscape. And now we would like to welcome Mr. Patricio Lombardi, Minister of Climate Change of the province of Misiones and President of the Environmental, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Commission. He'll give us his vision for the future on this process. Mr. Lombardi, the floor is yours. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Pamela, and good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to give you a couple of messages, because before we start, I would like to thank first to Stanley and Pamela for inviting me and for all their work on the Climate Change Commission, Sustainable Development and Environment of Sicosur from Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia. Their work is something that we must admire, and hopefully we can keep on doing something at least similar to what they achieved. Our team at the Ministry of Climate Change, Mayra and Julian, have prepared something, but I would like to say something before I start with my topic, because I have a message for all of you. And if you allow me, it's heavenly, we could say. And I would like to tell you the story of why I am here as the first Minister of Climate Change in America. At federal level and also national or subnational level, I am the first Minister of Climate Change. And last year, by this time, I was a colleague of Mariano Fernandez, an agent from Sicosur, and we worked together on the International Relations Commission. And under this framework, I was the secretary or subsecretary for this province in Argentina. The governor asked me 15 months ago, 16 months, I would say, 1 week before the start of this pandemic, he said that he had a meeting at his home in Santa Marta and asked me to go with him. So we went there because we met with the Pope for 40 minutes. And I insist this was at the end of February of last year. And throughout these 40 minutes, we talked about the environment. It was the governor, the Pope, and myself. So really the dedication, and if you allow me, the obsession that His Holiness has about this topic goes beyond that religious scope, I would say, about the ethical and moral aspect. And as Stanley said as well, I come from a foundation in which we have been working, and we recognize the people when they have the same heart, which is this green heart. And I saw that precisely on the Pope, and he was very, very concerned about the Amazon. And he had just received a book that I have here that he shared with me, and dedicated to the Amazon, Dear Amazon. And since you were talking about biomes and what we can do in order to have a better planet or a better home. So months later, 5 months later, the government of the province of Misiones approved the creation of the Ministry of Climate Change. So the governor offered me the position of minister. So immediately after, 1 week after I was offered this position, then the Pope communicated with us again, sending a written letter. And this is the message that I have for you. On that letter, which is public, the Pope asked us and asked myself precisely with my name to send my message to other communities. And the idea is not only to have this exclusive and specific ministry for climate change, but also to be able to understand that environmental aspects, climate change, is something that we must look at as a whole. We must understand that no one can be saved by himself. We must have an integrated vision, and responses must be holistic and based on nature. And it is really important to be a part of the civil society, and it's also important to know what they do and the role of all associations and foundations and subnational governments, because it's up to the mayors and governors, because they know what goes on their territories. So when we were looking at this summit on biodiversity of the United Nations in China, and also a summit on climate change in Scotland, as if these were totally separated topics. So we think that the time has come to group, to understand that we must work together. And this is the message that I wanted to convey with you. And my last message is related to Sicosur, because we are currently working on the legal personality. We are waiting for the approval. And as Stanley said, we had the first meeting this week of the Gender Commission for Sicosur, and on the biome maps, we will soon be adding 2 additional biomes that were not included first. One of them is really important, which is the Atlantic forest. And this is where we are currently, or what it used to be, because 90% of this forest has been paved. So this biome is shared with Paraguay and Brazil and Argentina, and the biome of Campos and Malezales. And the last, someone asked recently, a student, Daniel, was asking if Uruguay is participating. Yes. Yes, they participate with some of their department governments, and they asked if Cordoba was a part. And yes, indeed, Cordoba is part of Sicosur. So that's all for my messages, and then I'll start with my presentation. I apologize because I started with other messages, and now I'll go to my point, because I want to be specific regarding my message from Sicosur to all of you. And as you know, I'm kind of new to this, so I'll have to read it. From the Environmental Commission, Sustainable Development and Climate Change of Sicosur, we want to generate action that will tend to the conservation of biodiversity in the region, and also productive and social processes that involve our member states. And something that Stanley said is that 50 states, departments, provinces, but currently we have 71. So we went from 50 to 71 subnational states, which is important to clarify. And currently, we have a focus for the concept of management areas in a shared manner with cross-cutting management and sustainable development and climate change of our subnational governments that are a part of SICOSUR. And as we said, with the important participation of different organizations of civil society. Shared management is something that is a model that has been inspired in the experiences of the biosphere at the border or cross-border, but also with subnational governments throughout the processes for the creation and management of all these topics. And the idea is to share this management as an alternative in order to promote planning for the territory. And it's important to say that this is the cross-border, including other strict areas that already exist within the area, on how to apply Category 5 of these protected areas that have been proposed by IUCN. And this model for the management and governance that is based on the pillars of conservation of nature and sustainable development is going to contribute to implementation and objectives of sustainable development, and through a model that will relate to food production with the protection of nature and ecosystem services to contribute to mitigation, adaptation to climate change, conservation of forests and native ecosystems with an regional integration vision. And this new figure will become a categorization of a hierarchy of this area for SICOSUR, and they are the result of the lessons learned on the field. And to conclude, as part of these areas, we must share ecosystems and ecosystem services, cultural values, and social systems, systems for the use of the territory, the potentialities or potential that we have to improve the systems, the exchange of productive, social, and opportunities, and also technical assistance, and also the opportunities and the challenges in the production and social area. And after this pandemic, we had different challenges, among which if we are able to continue with these meetings that have been generated as a space for dialogue, and also the cooperation networks to strengthen these capacities in the management of protected areas and conservation of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this is the opinion of this presidency. And I wanted to be as brief as possible in order to have the opportunity to have some questions and answers. And a last message, I had the honor of being called by the Vice Minister of Environment from Colombia last week. I know that we have Colombian people. Today, I have people also from Chile. Vice Minister Galarza was telling me that along with Chile, Dominican Republic, and other countries, they are proposing a fair and equitable price for the ecosystem services, which would be to fix carbon dioxide or its capture. And I wanted to share this with you because I know how important it is to know that there are a group of countries led by Vice Minister Galarza that are working on this, and they have asked for the cooperation of SICOSUR to try and expand, just like Vice Minister in Colombia and the Pope have done, to expand this and convey it to other jurisdictions. So thank you, Pamela and Stanley, for allowing me this space from SICOSUR and all my other messages. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your time and for sharing with us your experience and this message that you shared. Thank you. Thank you, Stanley. And thank you, Pamela, for giving us the context of SICOSUR and all specific topics regarding the advances of the observatory. And since we don't have much time, we won't be able to open a Q&A session at this moment. We know, Mr. Minister, that you needed to go, so many questions have already been answered by you during your presentation or some of the participants on the chat. So once again, thank you. We know that you must go, and Stanley, Pamela are still connected, so maybe you can start answering some of the questions on the chat. And now we will continue with our second speaker. Excuse me, Cristina. I am reading a last question that it's quite interesting, so I'd like to answer to it. Libardo Suarez. It's a very good question. And these are the type of questions that I like. He says, how close, we're going to read it. How close is the perversity of our politicians to the strategic value of a clean alliance like Cicosur as part of their own interests? So where can we read the Pope's letter? So, well, the Pope's letter, we have it on the official Twitter, which is at CC Misiones for Climate Change, or Pat Lombardi, which is my personal one. I'll write down the link. And the other part of the question is, what I would say to Libardo is that we must think in a positive manner, and we must, I'm going to give you an example, a national example from Argentina, because Argentina is a country with a strong trend. And this, we said no to, if you take a look at the mission, you're going to see green, and this is the main map. So the Pope said, well, we see green, and then we see deforestation around it. And if everything turns like, I don't know, like in a violet color, and what is this? This is soy. So to answer to your question about politicians in particular, last week or last month or a couple of months, I don't remember, in this soy producing country, I found out that the Ministry of Agriculture has a national director for agroecology appointed by the president of the nation of Argentina. So I thought it was revolutionary to have a director of agroecology in a country that is thinking or has about the development, which is based on what I just mentioned. So I went to see him, and I said that, well, even though he's from the federal government and I'm from the state government, but this is the idea. This is what we must do. We must speak, and we must vote for the politicians that are including this and not those who are not. So it's on us to improve the type of politicians that we have. This is what I just wanted to say, and thank you for your time. Thank you again, Minister, and thank you for being so open to answer to this question from Libardo on the chat. So again, thank you. And thank you, Libardo, for such an interesting question. And thank you for being available. And so if you have a couple more minutes, please stay, and we understand if you need to go. So now we will listen to Alexandra Moreira, representing ACTO. Okay. I'll introduce her. Dr. Maria Alexandra Moreira is the Secretary General of the Permanent Secretary of the Organization of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. She comes from Bolivia, a lawyer with a specialization in environmental law, and he's been the Secretary General since January 2019 with a wide experience on the public sector with emphasis on environmental policies and multilateral policies. He was also a Minister of the Environment and Water in Bolivia from 2015 to 2017. And on the diplomatic arena, he was a member of the negotiating equipment from 2008 to 2014 in climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable development. He was also part of the Embassy of Bolivia and Mexico from 2017 to 2018 on bilateral, multilateral, and environmental topics. It is a pleasure to welcome you this morning. Thank you for your time and availability. because I know you have a complex agenda. So once again, thank you, and you have 20 minutes for this presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you, Cristina. I would like to thank you for all this initiative of webinars that you have with such an interesting focus and experience sharing, which is important for the management of protected areas and different tools. And I would like to thank Fernando Camacho, Director of CONAR in Mexico, and also the Regional Department of Parks for the invitation. So for the first time, we are participating in a context of this nature, so I would like to talk to you about how important it is for the Amazon region and also the context of our organization. Most of us know what we talk about when we hear about the Amazon region. Well, these are some highlights about our territory, its importance, which is given by its nature and extension, because we cover over 40% of the territory in South America. So geographically is highly important. So we are going to have an atlas about vulnerabilities that is currently being updated, and also the population that we have on the Amazon, which is approximately 48 million people. And we know that we are a very diverse region because we have 10% of the biological diversity known in the world. And when it comes to water resources, we have the biggest basin in the world, and our contribution is 70% in South America and 20% in the world. And we have 420 indigenous people with their own languages. And I think that we have the biggest tropical forest in the world. So when we talk about the Amazon region, we must talk in an integrated manner about all its components, both when it comes to nature and also social and economic aspects. And in the face of this situation, for this meeting, we have conducted a quick analysis about our extension to see the area in kilometers that we have in protected areas, and the 8 member countries. We have 2.6 million of square kilometers in protected areas. And in the face of how relevant this is, back in 1978, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela decided to sign the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization in order to have the institutionality and to formalize that work that had been conducted since 1978. In 1998, we have the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, which I have the privilege of directing till the end of the year. And back in 2002, we established the seat of this secretary in Brasilia, currently. And then we started configuring the institutionality along with the experiences on this political space, but also with a technical cooperation, mostly. And our main goals for this organization is precisely to what we share with Circosur, not that I heard from Stanley, because I know what our treaty means, the harmonic, sustainable development of the Amazon, to have a better life level of all the population and cities, and also the conservation of the environment and the rational use of natural resources, and also the incorporation of the Amazon territories to the respective national economies, because definitely as Amazon countries, we have a reality because our territories are also on the periphery, so we also have a vision to generate regional technical cooperation, social inclusion in the region, because there are a lot of gaps and inequalities that we must work on this Amazon region, and also a reduction of differences among our member countries and the territories. And in a simple manner, what is it that we do and who are we becoming? Well, we are the first social and environmental bloc constituted by these Amazon countries with their own institutionality. We are the only organization that has this intergovernmental recognition, and we are building policies, plans, and action programs in the territory. We generate technical and financial cooperation. We also try to raise awareness and try to be more visible when it comes to the work being conducted in the region, because I think that the countries are making a big effort, but they are also working at regional level. So it's quite complicated to understand. We are also a permanent forum for the management of knowledge and information exchange, strengthening the systems for monitoring and also territorial management. And we also have human talent in order to face these regional topics. And we also execute programs in projects and look for finance and cooperation. And based on this, we are trying to promote social inclusion and the conservation of the territory, of course. And as for organizational structure, this is how we work, and this is related to the invitation that we received from the governance that we currently have, how we are working, not only with the government institutions, but also scientific organizations, academic institutions, and part of the civil society as well. And the permanent secretariat, we have the Secretary General, two executive and administrative departments, and this is like the strongest staff of this secretariat. And we also have meetings with our focal points, which are the ministries of foreign affairs, with whom we conduct all these relationships. And from the point of view or of the political work and technical work, and then we have all the ministries of the different areas that we work with. For example, if we have a project in protected areas, it's going to be up to the environmental ministry, and through this ministry, then we can start working on the institutionality and the work at national level, because they are going to be the speakers from the political and other areas. And based on the work that we have conducted or the mandate that we have for Amazon Corporation, of course, we're going to have a multilateral agenda as well. Can we also work with a strategic agenda for Amazon Corporation, which is our most important tool to establish the different pillars and the vision and mission of the organization? But we must answer to demands of the countries in order to comply with all the work that we must conduct. And then we have this governance structure and also the knowledge of ecosystems, regional monitoring, experiences on the different projects on the territory, regional management, and also a work that is going to be more holistic. These are the work areas that must be defined at macro level. We are dedicated not only to the environmental aspect through the conservation and or sustainable conservation of resources, but we also have research, science, technology, environmental health, indigenous communities and tribal communities. And we also have the conservation and sustainable use of natural resources, in which we work with biodiversity, protected areas, and forests. I am not going to go deeper into all the work that we are conducting and all the initiatives, so that I can share with you 3 examples for you to understand what we currently do, what we've done so far, and what we are trying to do now. When it comes to forest and biological diversity and water resources, you're going to see on the center column the different projects that we have been working on or organizing for you to see some of our action axes. And I'm going to mention a couple of projects on each of these areas. And to the right, you see the different initiatives that we currently have and are being developed. And also we have a program access, and I can also mention the work that we are conducting now. We are talking about isolated actions or initiatives, and now we have program access in order to provide sustainability and governance to these actions that we currently have in our Amazon region.
En la temática de bosques tenemos uno de los proyectos más emblemáticos que ha sido el monitoreo de la cobertura forestal.
Which is the monitoring of forestry cover, where we had since 2011 until 2019, with the intention of contributing to governance on issues related to deforestation, the use of Amazonic land, which is what has allowed us this project. The drafting of national plans, forestry cover, but coordinated and structured with member countries, the implementation of national systems for monitoring, the installing of observation rooms. I want to place emphasis here. Our countries, the 8 member countries, have different levels of development, different levels of systems of environmental management. And so here we see the great effort that the organization has carried out. Countries like Suriname, Guyana, Bolivia, through this project, have been able to implement their first monitoring room for forestry issues. This has served not only for the Amazon region of Bolivia or the Amazon region of Suriname, but have actually become the official rooms for monitoring at the national level, equipping with infrastructure, tools, capacity building, all public officials. In all cases, from other countries that have information systems, we have strengthened and enhanced what already existed. So here we see a cooperation effort that is structured at different levels. Based on this work that the area carried out, information was generated at the regional level with information from all 8 countries with regards to the quality and extension of forestry cover, the training of the technical staff for the ministries, but also at the level of the other subnational systems, the drafting of national products like shared maps and regional maps focused on deforestation and the change of soil use. And we're waiting for the next stage of this process, which we're hoping that next year we can disperse the financing to contribute to this important work. On the issue of biodiversity, right now, we're working on the regional project for the monitoring and control of species of wild flora and fauna to also generate national systems and a regional system that is interoperable on the management of knowledge, which will generate that traceability mechanisms that the national systems for the issuance of electronic permits may be articulated at the regional level, in as much as we need to coordinate and interoperate and structure this information in order to have a better management in conservation and in the control of these species, threatened species. This is one of the efforts that we're currently conducting, and we're currently working on equipping and generating knowledge for the system from the very planning stages in the cases that already exist for several countries. On the issue of water resources, with a focus on the basin and on the integrated management of water resources, we are, for example, implementing simulation models for hydrological scenarios to try to truly have this broader vision with sectors like water, energy, food. We have the implementation of shared networks. We are establishing two important networks for water quality and a hydrometeorological network, which will be monitoring networks, which will also ensure early alert systems at the regional level. This will implement the implementation of a situation room at our Amazon Regional Observatory to generate this information and to equip the countries with data, information in real time. And on the other hand, we are also working on a strategic cross-borders plan to provide basic services for our region, among other initiatives to what is the water resources framework. Among the new projects and initiatives between May, June, and July, I wanted to mention these four important programs, which we have agreed upon among different countries. And I make mine Stanley's words when he mentions how difficult it is to agree and reach to an agreement among 8 different countries. We know that all 8 countries, like every other region, have their own unique features, their own interests, and their way of governing, their own ideologies. But I think that the good experience of the organization of the Amazon Treaty Agreement is that we have focused, especially in these 3 years of management, on the technical side of things, on technical cooperation. We have had really the environment, the opportunity to work concretely in activities and technically in order to achieve these types of consensus. Everything that we are working on, programs, initiatives, studies, or negotiation documents need to be accepted unanimously by consensus. So, yes, this involves quite a bit of time in negotiation and work, but we have results, and especially the technical and political will that definitely supports to concrete these actions. In June, July, we were able to approve the Memorandum of Understanding and Mutual Cooperation for the Management of Fire among the countries of our region and the Program for Forests of ACTO. This was obviously one of our goals since many years back, but in these years, focusing on the technical side of things, we have achieved having and implementing these 2 documents, as well as the Biological Diversity Program, which comprises an instrument that is more than merely important because of the convergence of parties that we have also with parties in China. And in this biodiversity program, we have a rapid assessment from the ecosystem services of our region for the methodology of IPDS that I will mention briefly just further ahead. Our memorandum, its goal is to generate and establish a system for the cooperation in the Amazon region to face environmental, technical, and social problems and tackle forest fires in a comprehensive manner involving risk management and the combat of these forest fires, which is one of the most complex topics to really manage within our Amazon region. The goal of our program is to have better governance in sustainable forest management with the control of causes for deforestation, forest degradation. Obviously, it includes also, again, forest fires. On August 2nd, we will have a webinar for the launch of these 2 important documents. We will be thrilled to have you join us. The Program for Biological Diversity, as I said, has as its goal the management of biological diversity and the protection of traditional knowledge of indigenous people, tribal people, with actions to short and mid and long term to achieve the goals of the CDB. The instruments of its management right now, certainly the agreement that we will establish, or the post-2020 agenda, the goals and aims of the 2030 agenda. As part of this program, we're also carrying out a research that will involve the methodology of IPDS, which is a will allow us to know the status quo of our environmental resources and the ecosystemic services, the drivers of threats. We will also be applying spices for the dialogue of knowledge. We're here generating an important movement of researchers and scientists from our Amazon region, which are joining efforts to build this important assessment. As part of our program, we have precisely the management of protected areas and other effective measures for conservation that are based areas such as OMEC. Definitely the development of national actions and regional actions to enhance and strengthen the national systems of protected areas become now a priority. We would love to have the contacts and links with you to include your experiences and results so that we can co-support national actions and binational and trinational actions that are being carried out. And in closing, since I'm going over time, I want to tell you a little bit more about the Regional Amazonic Observatory, which essentially is a reference centers for information and a virtual forum to endorse the flow of information among institutions and authorities between different countries of member countries, with the scientific community, with universities, and also with social organizations and NGOs, etc., to generate information that is linked to studies and researches and initiatives. We will inaugurate in September this Regional Amazonic Observatory. We want institutions to be able to compare data contents in this observatory through the different applications. We will have modules that integrate thematic models, country windows, and also based on the different informations that we are able to access, we will start with modules on water resources and modules on CITESs to expose information on threatened wildlife and flora. And this is not just for member countries, but we will also highlight secondary and third-party information that we may have available. And in closing, what type of reports will we be having access to? We will have dashboards, national indicators, and decision-making indicators on variables from Amazonic research. We will have a list of Amazonic species and on water resources. To date, we have already uploaded information for 697 databases from 5 countries in the Amazon region. Here we have more than 20 million records. The aim is to generate interoperability and the articulation of these different systems. We believe that this will be a very useful tool for the public management work that will have to be carried out and for the decision-making processes from the political level that are involved in the different countries. I want to thank you for this opportunity and for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Your presentation was very interesting. It's very interesting to learn how the Amazon system is structured and how it works and how complex it is to articulate efforts among 8 different countries. So thank you very much for you and all those who work in the system, and all of the people that love the Amazon Amazon basin. We thank you very much for protecting the biodiversity and cultural heritage of our dear Amazon basin. There's a few questions in the chat, but I don't know, Alexandra, do you have time to wait until the end of the event so that you can answer these questions during the Q&A session? And if you have to leave, then if you can try to answer them via the chat. I'm not sure what your agenda is like. Okay, Christina, there's a few that I can answer via the chat, and if we have time at the end of the session, then I'll be pleased to. Okay, thank you very much, Alexandra. Thank you very much for your time and willingness to share with us in this environment. After this presentation, I would like to grant the word to Leandra Nunez from Colombia. Claudia Nunez from Colombia. Can you share your screen, Claudia, to make sure that your presentation displays correctly? And in the meanwhile, I will introduce you formally. Claudia Nunez Preto was born in Colombia. She graduated at the University Javeriana. She has a specialization in political ecology, a degree in the public governance, and a degree on Oceanopolitics from Sergio Boleda University. She has 27 years of experience as a scientific researcher and consultant on conservation programs, on the management of protected areas, issues of environmental education, sustainable development, mainly in the Amazon basin and in different Amazon countries. She's also provided professional services for the public sector at the national and international level, as well as in NGOs. She currently, since 2010, has been working as a specialized official in cooperation efforts for the national parks of Colombia. Claudia is the focal point for the Parks Network, and this work includes the support for the sub-regional area of the Parks Network, and she's the liaison for the governance group of the Amazon Vision, among many other responsibilities. Claudia is also a part of this work team that we are carrying forth in all of these programs for the webinars. So thank you very much, Claudia, for joining us in all of these processes and for being here with us to share your presentation. It just loaded. Can we check your audio? Okay, thank you very much. Cristina, a warm welcome for all of the students that have joined us today, for all our guests, and in particular, a warm welcome for those who joined us in previous conferences. Sandra Moreira, the General Secretary for the General Secretariat for the Amazon Corporation and for ACTO, and a special greeting for Minister Patricia Lombardi of SICOSUR. So, as Cristina mentioned, I have here a unique role, since my presentation will be focusing on the co-governance of the Amazon Vision, of the subnetwork of protected areas of the Amazon area from the Parks Network. And in this case, with Colombia, we're acting as the focal point for the working group of the governance group, which means that it's not just Colombia that is presenting here, but with me, we have all 8 countries for the Amazon biome presenting, along with the French Guiana territory as well, overseas territory. So this presentation will follow the technical sheets. We are sort of the victims of our own creation because, as Stanley was saying, by implementing this webinar series, and Claudia Marin also mentioned it as the coordinator from FAO, as the technical secretariat for the Parks Network, the work and the design of these webinars has been done working closely with the working group on governance. And so I feel now that I am in the other's shoes, right? In the other's shoes when we went through the technical sheets, because all of these webinars, we want them to not only serve as an area for education and presentation, but also to establish systematically an analysis of impact in light of the governance in protected areas, and why not an outlook on territorial governance. My presentation will focus on 5 aspects of this technical sheet so that students who are joining us in this course may also do their links and matches among the different topics that they're seeing and what this presentation is all about, so that whatever is not answered here, we can answer it later in the course, and it can go through our esteemed professors, people like Stanley, Cristina, and Ana Valverde. So we go with the legal support component. And for this, oh, sorry, 1 second. I will ask Stanley to please put on screen a short video that we have to make this session more dynamic. I will stop sharing my screen so that Stanley can start with that.
Ahí está compartiendo tu pantalla. Ahí, Carlos.
Sharing screen. There we go. The Amazon vision of the Parks Network is an alternative to protect the Amazon basin based on the integration of protected areas. 8 countries and the French Guiana territory are collaborating to apply the work plan in protected areas from the program for protection at the Amazon scale. This means defining priority landscapes for protection, comprising protected areas from different countries that are key for the mitigation and adaptation to climate change and protection of biodiversity.
Significa también la
It
participación.
also means to involve the participation of indigenous communities and local stakeholders in the management of their own territory, so that their benefits can be shared.
Y significa, por último,
And it
la
also means,
sostenibilidad.
finally, to provide the financial sustainability to protected areas and an increase in the effectiveness of the management of these territories. The backup and participation by the international community and productive sectors are key so that countries may continue with their duties. Discover the Amazon vision and support its implementation so that jointly we may all enjoy its fruits.
Muchas gracias, Stalin. Entonces continuamos.
Thank you very much, Stanley. So now I continue displaying my screen so that we can go back to this video that gets us in line with an outlook to governments in this initiative from Amazonic Vision. Remembering that we are presenting as the focal group for the working group. We first of all need to look at what the Parks Network is, because why we're speaking of the subnetwork of Amazon area protected areas. It's important. Look at what a great link and match with what was presented by Secretary Alexandra. Because in ACTO, also, we established the Secretariat in 2002, but it also has a parallel with what we incorporate as the park networks as the foundation, which is to gather the goals of technical cooperation among developing countries, which was made in Buenos Aires in 1978. This is very important because it's a leap, it's an innovation that was started by national authorities for protected areas back at the time in the region to complement the cooperation between North and South, the traditional cooperation from developed countries towards the so-called developing countries. And we started a technical cooperation among peers, sharing resources and sharing knowledge. And at the same time, the Parks Network also takes on in its regulation the commitments that were taken on with the conference, the UN Conference on the Environment and Development from 1972. So the Parks Network was established, legally speaking. This is a Latin American network for technical cooperation in national parks, other protected areas, wildlife and flora, which was created in 1983 under the promotion and thanks to the participation of various interests from national areas of protected areas, FAO, and also an important support by likewise of the UN Nations Environment Program. It was established with a technical nature. This is technical cooperation. Even though we have heard and important questions were asked about politics, I want to highlight that we must have, I don't know if this has been covered, but we need to keep reflections on politics. It's all very important. If we as protected areas need to escalate technical issues that are relevant, like the ones presented by Minister Lombardi with the letter from the Pope, there are issues, for example, at ACTO and other authorities, where we also must start speaking a political language and be able to create awareness in that environment. Because politics are positive, politics are good. We need politics, especially when we speak of public policy. But we need to have the emotional and mental health and balance to be able to manage the negative aspects of poorly handled politics, of poorly handled public policies, and of the elements that perhaps are of greater conflicts, such as potential corruption or other issues. But that cannot be an obstacle for us to keep making progress in technical cooperation. And we end up being members of this parks network, the protected areas for 19 countries from Latin America and the Caribbean. The regulation also establishes private institutions, but we believe that so far the appropriate language is to also say we have non-governmental organizations and multilateral agencies such as FAO, such as the United Nations Environmental Program. And we're also joined by specialists from the various countries and the regions that work in protected areas, wildlife and flora. And that is the case for our training exercise here with the Parks Network, with the so important relevance and participation of the academic world. And in this case, the Latin American faculty for protected areas. I'm not sure why it's not allowing me to change slides. We will look at it again here. Maybe you're seeing it here without putting it up on screen. Stop seeing your presentation. We no longer see your presentation. We don't see your PowerPoint. You see it here? Yes, now we see it. Okay, now it went through. Perfect. So we needed that active pause. So in conclusion, we're saying that the park networks enhances the protection of the parks of its member countries, shares knowledge, approaches cultural and environmental heritage of our countries. And here we start delving into this governance structure. We do this through a secretariat that is permanent, a technical secretariat. Before moving on to the next slide, I would simply, since we're talking about structure and governance and legal aspects, say that the Parks Network has a regulation that we are defined with regards to who does what is the goal, what is the scope, what is the vision, and how through this regulation we can work. And here we see the map, we can put it into practice. We have a technical secretariat that is exercised by FAO in Chile and by the United Nations Environment Program in Panama. We have a regional coordination that is elected every 2 years by all of the member countries. We have a regional council that holds periodic annual meetings. And in order to be able to exercise this governance and management, we do this in 3 sub-regions: the Caribbean region, the Central American and Caribbean region, the Andean Amazon region, and the Southern Cone. And we have 7 groups of active work that allow to establish with better dynamics the decisions that have been taken in this regional council, the coordination that is done by the country, accompanied by this technical secretariat. So here in the sub-region Amazon Andean region, we can see the 8 different countries involved, plus the French overseas territory, where we speak of an Amazon biome that encompasses 6,851,602 square kilometers, but we also look at the whole basin, which is 5,846,492 square kilometers, or the expanded Amazon, which is 8,225,288 square kilometers. And here what's important is to note that the light green, dark green is the biome, the light green is our protected areas, and that we don't only carry out work among the different protected areas, but also in cross-borders protection efforts.
A los años 90, por
This
fortuna.
leads to the 19th because I thank God for the honor of being here presenting this topic, because I've seen one way or the other how I've been involved in since 1997 in my case on this topic. And in here we can see how this network of parks and the work in this area has been hand in hand with the cooperation treaty since the 90s, when we had the chance to execute a project financed by the European Union on a proposal for the planning of the biological and cultural conservation in this area. The stakeholders are the national authorities of protected areas in the Amazon countries, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, Venezuela, and then we were joined by Guyana and French Guiana. And since the 90s, we've had the support of IUCN, WWF, FIO, UNDP, and the Secretary of the CDB with the participation of SPOTCA and SGCAN, and obviously the participation of OTCA. And mainly during the last period, I mean, since 2008, those of us who have been in Bariloche, we saw all this decision making and all these recommendations on all these congresses in Latin American protected areas. And this is how important working in a network. And this is something that we must take into account. Also, working into a network, because this biome is so important, and protected areas have been saying that we must take care of climate change, and also that protected areas are nature-based solutions, but we keep on listening to this. So since 2008, these countries, through this governance structure and decision-making and participation on joint interests, defined a vision for the Amazon that is telling us how we want to see ourselves as part of this Amazon biome based on ecosystems. And I want to emphasize that in order to implement this vision, back in 2009, this network of protected areas, because maybe some of the participants know about this, we were talking about the Surapa network, and then we signed an agreement with the WWF, CDB, and Red Parques in order to implement this vision. And this is how we are learning how to work in the framework of this action plan that we worked on since 2010 to 2020 in the framework of these protected areas. And we also have an objective that is associated to the contribution of the management of these protected areas systems. And we must manage or contribute to a decrease of the anthropogenic problems in the context of climate change, which means a contribution to protected areas and to the economies and communities, and also biodiversity at local level, then at landscape scale, then biome, and then a global impact. And in order to do that, we were based on 4 elements of the action plan for protected areas that are related to planning, governance, participation, equality and participation of benefits, and also the distribution of benefits, then favorable activities that are related to opportunities for the implementation of these types of actions, and also everything related to the regulations, evaluation, and supervision to see what practices are the ones that we most improve, so that if we have some weaknesses or deficiencies, we can turn that into a success. And this Amazon vision has 4 pillars that are related to conservation opportunities, integration of the vision of the indigenous and local communities, effective management of protected areas, and of course, what we can call karma, which is something that we must reiterate, which is the sustainable financing for protected areas. And as for the impact, it's important to mention how through this data on impact, when it comes to governance, dialogue, exchange of information and efforts, this is going to result to our first report that we have from the implementation of this plan for protected areas on the Amazon basin or region or biome. And we have 97 protected areas back in 2010, and for 2017, we had approximately 19 protected areas that have been created hand in hand with all these regional discussions on protected areas. We have been asked to talk about the advantages and opportunities that these types of mechanisms can potentially offer in order to improve environmental governance of territories, how to improve the way in which we position protected areas in international mechanisms, and if this mechanism could be an opportunity for national systems of protected areas to become a part of intersectorial dialogue processes. And I want to tell you that we have all the opportunities because we have a comparative advantage in the region. And this comparative advantage is very strong in the region because we have a systematic work that has not been paused through time, especially since 2018 and up to date. This is permanent, constant, and dedicated work. And since 2010, we have a group of governance for the Amazon region, which results in the dynamism of the integration through all the protected area systems of this region to be permanent and contributes as well to a common vision and also multilateral relations. And it's important to remind that we have all other work groups because these groups also have this same level of incidence than the one that we have for governance. These are the objectives that I have been mentioning since the beginning. When it comes to technical cooperation, since 1978, and this network had taken them on, they are still in force, and they are opportunities for change when it comes to governance, because they invite to an exchange of knowledge. And it's not only on a closed loop, because if we have information, we have power. So we need this promotion for the diffusion of information and information handling so that decisions are made with a better criteria. And of course, this is going to go hand in hand with everything that we do, that effort that we have been conducting since 2008 to strengthen capacities. And I say since 2008 as an Amazon vision, because if we go to the park network, we can take a look at the web or of these parks or of the FAO to see all the information that we have prepared. And if we think about how we can improve, well, of course, there's room for improvement, because as you realize, a regional institution like OTCA or SICOSUR could consider this group as an advisor or a consultant or implementer of the agenda when it comes to protected areas, because we are working on the same things, but on different channels maybe. So as a sub-network of protected areas, we also have a regional observatory for protected areas and a couple of publications that I'll show you later on. So as with any other institutions, we have agreements, and well, I have my own timer, as you can see. And based on our proven experience in this Amazon region, maybe we can be the implementers, advisors, or consultants when it comes to protected areas on these mechanisms. And I have just a couple of points that I'll move on. Lessons learned. What are the challenges and recommendations? As for lessons learned, throughout these 8 years of implementation, of course, we've have so many things to tell, but I don't have time. So I'll mention the importance of human resources allocation, because we do not only have inspiration and philosophy, but we must be concrete to see how much will I be willing to contribute. For example, not as an additional burden or task, but with a primary and concrete responsibility when it comes to participating in governance groups in order to define the common interests and also resource allocation, because we are not going to depend on financial cooperation or technical cooperation, because it means that there is a decision that is going to define the different positions in order to work on the tasks associated to these types of commitments. And it's also important to emphasize the commitments and my will, because I need to have that will, because I can be part of a meeting and then I can say, yes, I'll commit to that. But then when it comes to doing that, and if we go to financial of human resources, we might have a long way to go. You have, someone has an open mic, so I will kindly ask you to close your mics. I'm sorry to interrupt. So we must not work alone. We need to incorporate more stakeholders, even if they think differently. But as Stanley said, when it comes to protected areas and their governance, we must take a look at this, as we saw during one of these webinars, as a third generation protected areas where we're going to have more governance out of the polygon. And definitely we cannot do things by ourselves. And when it comes to accountability for these mechanisms, that has been a principle and a fundamental factor. And we work hand in hand with our technical secretariat, UNDP and FAO, which helps the country in charge of regional coordination. And of course, we must have a good structure that is going to help our operations and not to become too bureaucratic. As for the challenges, what I want to tell you, for example, when I said that I have been working on this since 1997, and then with the Natura Foundation and so many other things, I don't tell you about this just for resume purposes or out of ego. But it's important to think about governance because we have different generations, and now I'll ask who will be after me. So what am I doing in order to train and transfer my knowledge to those that are coming after me? And this is something that we must consider at different scales when it comes to regional, national aspects and different stakeholders. And the other challenge is related to knowledge management. So if I am here and I have accumulated information on publications and knowledge, then the question would be, how can I ensure the traceability, historic memory, and those for the generations? Because I'm not talking about just a repository, but that is something that we must manage in order to avoid doubling efforts. And we have a gender focus that is also important, and it's still a challenge. And of course, we still have a pressure and challenges in the Amazon region that are inviting and motivating ourselves, like the minister said with the letter written by the Pope, because I think that definitely it was a really emotional moment. And this is going to permeate the passion and commitment in our work. And definitely everything is going to be linked to the leadership and the Amazon vision, and all these initiatives are going to have that sense, and they are totally committed. And then we must go beyond promoting cooperation between the countries, because that is our principle, and that is something that we do on a day-to-day in cooperation in the South with different projects and initiatives. But now we must have an incidence on other spaces with other stakeholders in order for this inspiration to be part of a serious public policies. And as for citizens' participation, I must talk about the mechanisms or what we do in order for peasants, indigenous, and local communities to participate on these mechanisms, and if we have budget counterparts for this purpose. And the answer is yes, there is the evidence. These are some of the publications that are recent. And as Claudia said, Since 2014 to date, we see how everything has been built with the participation of local and indigenous communities. And on some occasion, we have the participation of a management-based focus and others from shared governance. So it's important for all of us that already handle these concepts. It is evident that our Amazon vision is going to prioritize or focus more on a government governance, but as part of the local exercise, that the government at local level is going to have practices associated to shared management. But as part of our governance structure, I can tell you that is done on behalf of governments. And when it comes to financing, yes, we've had that since 1983 with the support of FAO. And for the last period, we had a project financed by WWF, and it was also implemented with the participation of FAO and Amazon Vision. And as you can see, it is so important to see how we can start changing the language, or I don't know, maybe sharing a cup of coffee, because we have been mentioning that protected areas are nature-based solutions, and we've known that for quite some time. So back in 2014 and 2015, we executed precisely a project for nature-based solutions for climate change based on protected areas. And this is one of the challenges that we still have to face, to see how other stakeholders that are decision makers regarding the land management in large landscape, we have not had an impact on them. So of course, we are going to have more questions associated to this topic because there's a lot of history. So thank you, and that is all. Thank you, Stanley and Christina, for the opportunity. And once again, behind all of this, we have Hilda, Giancarlo in Peru, and we have Cesar, Leah, and many others, because that's our group today. But of course, we have other generations that have been working on Amazon Vision so that we can have all the results that I had the pleasure and honor to present. Thank you, Claudia. It's been clear. We have all the details in order to understand the governance structure, how you operate at Amazon Vision. And there's interest in your presentation to see if we can download it from the network. And it's going to be available on PDF format. And then you can go to Web Parques to find all this material. Well, all these presentations have been really interesting, and as moderator, I apologize for taking much of your time, because all presentations have been so interesting, and I did not want to cut them short. So I'll ask my colleagues, Alan and Veronica, because they have been following the chat and questions. So from what I can see, many of them have already been answered on behalf of Dr. Moreira and the minister. So I don't know if there are any questions pending for speakers.
Para los tres grupos de oradores.
Sí, bueno, como vos decís, ya varias de las preguntas fueron contestadas.
Many of the questions have already been answered, as you said. There are still just a few to be answered, and Veronica is gathering those for the last presentation. So if you have questions for Claudia, please write them down on the chat. So for now, we have a question from Daniel for the second presentation. It's interesting to see. No, it was for the minister. It's interesting to see how they stop the advance of agribusiness in soy in Misiones, but how can you approach this sector on pine and eucalypt that are going to Well, we're going to leave it there because the minister is no longer with us, so we're going to share it with him later on. And we have another question. I have these questions that have not been answered for the minister. Yeah, we'll send them to them. So maybe, and we also have one for Alexandra. In countries like Colombia with high index of institutional corruption, what do you think is best for the conservation of protected areas in the Amazon that overlaps other indigenous communities? How would you handle this with the public institutions or how? Well, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, corruption is something that is going to permeate all our countries in Latin America and the whole world. I consider that definitely governance, and this is what this vision is about. It's about good governance between government institutions, civil institutions. So the more stakeholders and the more accountability we have, and if we can articulate scientific information, academic information, and the more people we get involved, including local communities and indigenous communities that are a part, and if they are involved in all these actions, programs, and projects for environmental management, I think it's better, because I think that these need to empower all other sectors that are highly important. And I think that as part of the projects, both from institutions and institutions like ours that are intergovernment and also public management, I think that this is something that we must promote, but also we must have empowerment of other sectors so that they can exert their rights and to have a shared management, because I think that knowledge on all these platforms and in the framework of ICDB and also traditional communities, indigenous communities are key to everything that we must do as part of these ecosystems and protected areas. And of course, this is going to become highly important. And I think that one of the solutions would be to be able to share this management and this obligation, and of course, empower the population in general. Thank you, Alexandra. The other questions are for the minister, so maybe you can continue. Thank you, Alan and Vero. We have questions for our three speakers, or four, because we have Stanley and Pamela as well. So the idea would be to have a round of answers. So maybe each one of you could answer, what do you think are the barriers that are going to make it more difficult for the technical system of protected areas in different countries to be able to be a part of these political spaces like SICOSUR or OTCA and sources for articulation, and to have an incidence in the territorial governance? So what are the barriers for the participation in political spaces? So I'll give 2 minutes to each one of the speakers to answer to this question, and we'll start with Alexandra, if you agree. Because I know you have a complex agenda, and then we'll continue with Stanley, Pamela, and Claudia, if you agree, and then we would close this webinar. Well, thank you for the question. Well, I think that it's very real from a technical standpoint. And I think that we have different barriers, but I'll concentrate on a couple of points. And I think that from a political vision, and with all due respect, because I have been in a political position as well, But I think that sometimes we have many of the authorities that are not familiar with this technical perspective. So I think that we don't have that link or this comprehension of the political and technical aspect. And I think that this results in an important need to be able to have all the scientific information for those politicians that are making decisions, and we must try and translate this information and these technical needs into the political arena, because oftentimes the authorities will not necessarily understand clearly what really goes on when it comes to management of protected areas based on certain models or tools or data. So I think that it's important because we have different institutions represented here for these efforts to be really joined, because definitely the efforts of the park network are the effort made by Secosur and OTCA. And I think that we must generate more alliances, not to repeat actions or not to waste financial resources, because I think that we all have problems with the financial resources of those that cooperate with us or the public investment that we have on our territories. But we must generate a liaison between the technical aspect and political advisors. And I honestly believe that this link that we must create between the needs that we are currently facing, we must have a more institutional-based approach from what the people that are managing protected areas out on the field go through, and we must relate these to the authorities out there in the capital, because the realities are completely different. And if politicians, for example, do not go and visit the protected areas and are not familiar with them, for example, border areas or cross-border areas, because this is where we have all these problems, and if they don't go and see it, they won't be able to understand the needs and what we really must do. So if we must define all these processes, and we must generate information that is going to be adapted, and we must take into consideration the institutionality that we must have for common spaces between the technical and political aspects. And I think that this is necessary in order to have this approach, and so that we can have the technical and political things together.
Excelente, Alexandra.
Excellent, Alexandra. Thank you very much for the twin vision. We know that you're Minister of the Environment and Water, and you can say this firsthand, especially from the side of technical cooperation. You can also place more emphasis on the important dialogue that you mentioned. Thank you very much. Pamela is no longer here. She told us that we have to go out. We're going to ask Stanley Argueda on behalf of the presenters from Secosur to answer in 2 minutes this question, and finally to Claudia as well in 2 minutes over the chat to close. Stanley? Yeah, first of all, I wanted to add to Alessandra's words what she's mentioning. And I think that one of the important barriers, those of us who work on conservation issues, we've not been trained on political issues to understand the logic of a person that occupies a position. We oftentimes hope that a politician be a technician with power, but unfortunately it's not like that. They don't reach their position because they're good technicians or because they understand the process. Oftentimes our own ministries of the environment don't know much about the environment, and that's not wrong. Being the director of an institution or the technical office, he's the political leader. We often hope in Costa Rica to create a twin figure where the minister was somebody with a good political positioning and the vice minister was a good technician. So we would go to the vice minister. The vice minister translated things to a political language and discussed it with the minister. And the minister was the person who negotiated politically these things in the political environments in the country. That worked very well in Costa Rica, precisely to try to achieve this. Obviously, one of the barriers is that when we sit down to speak with politicians, the first time when we have the prejudice, first of all, we have the prejudice of corruption. We have the prejudice of not giving support to any politician because that might make us seem that we're supporting some poor decisions or other things that are happening in the political world, and we're sort of phobic about this. And when we understand with the politicians and understand them, and the politician doesn't necessarily know the technical language we know, but we need to have political training. We don't all have to be from the park system. We need people with political training who knows how to work in these environments. Environments like ACTO or Psicosur. To delve into the world of public policy, we need a person who understands this logic and how we can work and negotiate with them. So we don't have to all train in politics or all be politicians, but we need people within our institutions who have that training, that have the ability to understand and transform messages, be able to transform technical language into political messages so that they can be heard and understood by politicians. And once we have that, everything else will become easier. We'll be able to have that impact. A number of barriers will collapse because that to me is the main barrier. It's communication, it's language, it's the message. I think that is where the main barrier is located. I think it's a very clear message, and it's a challenge for those of us who work in conservation to have technical specialists on this topic to generate dialogue between the technical and political world. So in closing, in just a couple of minutes, Claudia Nunez, if you could answer this question about the barriers. You're muted, Claudia, still. We can't hear you. We agree with the comments made by the Secretariat and Professor Stanley. I would perhaps highlight the following. What is the barrier that on a daily manner, we focus mostly on measurements, data, workshops, management plans, and we often overlook an important task. I think it's rare for technical authorities to do lobbying and understand the importance of lobbying. That translation to the political world won't happen on its own. Somebody has to do it. So we need to include in our technical working teams, in our mechanisms for governance for protected areas, that in this case may exist in the region, who is doing ongoing lobbying, who is being constant advocacy with these mechanisms. So that is the barrier. Yeah, today we have to do this, but yeah, we don't have a north, we don't have a constant effort. So that also entails knowing well the regular ways and how the political realm works. Because it's not just about asking for an appointment and having one single meeting. No, you need to know who and how decisions are made in the political mechanism. We all know in ACTO that the permanent secretariat, its instruction is received through the mandate of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If they do not generate those instructions, then there's nothing else to do. So wonder what is the path to follow as technicians so that a decision can reach the level of the ministries so that the protected areas can be part of a permanent agenda. In ACTO, we have the regional program for biodiversity, but now we want to be a technical group that is advisory, with an advisory role. So I would back up the previous comments with the fact that information. It's all about who does it at the personal level. It's not enough to just simply upload the information and translate it to the political language, but also it has to go hand in hand with the fact that somebody has to bring the information to the press or the political decision maker and has to show people the impact that they can have. We need to focus on new paradigms. I think that is why I really love those exercises in focusing on new political paradigms. We need more technicians that are in love with the political realm. Stanley says, not because we want to achieve a political position, there's a specific vocation for that, but we need technicians who wish to speak this political language, who can do the role of advocacy and translate this information to the political realm. And finally, I close by saying that one of the big barriers for protected areas for these exercises is that it's not among our tasks. These types of things end up being an additional burden, is a technical and serious part of the work agendas. Thank you very much, Claudia. Very interesting, all 3 points of view. Also the experience that several of you have had of the public role and from the technical side of things as well, and your previous political role. So it's very interesting. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask my colleague, Paula, if you can open your cameras to close this session with a brief picture so that we can have a record of this webinar. If everybody can open their cameras and get ready so that Paula prepares for the closing picture, telling you that there were 4 webinars throughout the month of August as part of this cycle. We will have a focus on the Amazon, but throughout August, please keep in mind all of the webinars for August. They will all be on Fridays at the same time, from 8 to 10 Costa Rican time. And next week, we will work on the shared management of protected areas with local communities. In the cases, we'll look at the cases of Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. So if you're sitting down, we look at the protected areas, and with prior, so Paula, we're ready for a picture. Please smile. This is the time that everybody's waiting for, obviously. I thank you for keeping smiling for 10 minutes. No, sorry, it's 4 pictures that I have to take, so I'll let you know, okay? I would appreciate that while we're taking the pictures, you don't write, because otherwise you'll be looking elsewhere. Now smile, everyone. This is the first picture.
Ya casi les tomo la segunda, un segundito, por favor.
Alone, now I'm going to take the second one.
Voy con la segunda. Sonrían nuevamente.
Second picture, smile again.
Muy, muy lindos y muy lindas. Excelentes sonrisas.
You all look beautiful. Nice smiles.
Voy con la tercera.
Third picture.
Sonrían, por favor. Exactamente.
Creo que ahí estamos, ¿no?
La última, me falta la última.
Pantalla.
The last one.
Sí, muchas gracias por sus hermosas sonrisas.
Thank you very much for beautiful smiles. Thank you very much. Sorry for going over time. Thank you, Alexandra, for accompanying us to the very end. And we remain available to you. August 12th, we have this webinar where I will send out the invite, and please share it with your networks. I think that the efforts for the Amazon region and in the Latin American region, we need to unite efforts. So I'll be pleased to. We're very interested to contribute to this work. And please, Stanley, Claudia, we will all discuss so that we can focus on protected areas, also part of ACTO. Perfect. We're available to you, and we'll wait to share the invitation for the 3rd stage of the observatory. Thank you very much.
honor, bendiciones.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.